Hi, this is Ray Stevens with John Broughton on Retrospectives, celebrating 25 years on the air on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Can you pinpoint a moment in time in your childhood where you really started to show an interest in music?
Oh, I guess I always did. They say they used to sit me up on the refrigerator and let me sing to the radio when I was 2-3 years old. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5 or 6. I think it was 6. And I've been, involved in music ever since.
Tell us about your musical influences that were around you and attracting your attention when you were growing up in Georgia.
Well, the radio. I mean, there was no TV. I was born in '39, and maybe there was TV somewhere, but not in Clarkdale, Georgia. So, radio was it. And back then, as you may recall, I don't know, John, but radio was pretty eclectic. I mean, they played a mixture of all kinds of music. Everybody in recent years has separated the styles of music into categories, and when you make the charts in this category of music page in the Billboard. And back then, I don't even know they had a Billboard, but the music was pretty eclectic, and so I enjoyed all kinds of music.
What would you consider your first major break in music?
Oh gosh, I guess when I met Bill Lowry, who you may know or may not, he just recently died, but he was a very successful music publisher in Atlanta, and he encouraged all the talent around Atlanta to write so that he could have something to publish. And there were a bunch of us around there just looking for any way to get into the music business. It was me and Jerry Reed and Joe South and Billy Joe Royal and Tommy Rowe. Gosh, there were just all kinds of people that Bill helped and got started.
Now, is that correct? I think I read that you had hopes of a career in classical music at one stage, and you were studying classical piano?
No, not really. I studied classical piano because that's what they taught. The piano teachers back in those days, you played Bartok and you played Bach and you played, because that's what the program was. And I liked it okay, but I really sort of gravitated toward the more commercial styles of music.
Sure. Do you still tinker away at the classics for your own enjoyment sometimes?
Oh, very rarely.
Yeah.
I appreciate the classics, and I appreciate the technical aspect and the mathematics of classical music. But and they're not just mathematical. I mean, classical music runs the gamut of emotion too. But I guess I'm just a common sort of guy, and I really like the more commercial music.
Talk about some of your early records now, and you had an early lesson in legal matters with music with one of your early hits, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Tell us what happened there.
I'm not really sure, but I wrote a song called Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, and I thought it was really funny and commercial back in its day. But this was it must have been 60. And so I cut it, and sure enough, it started taking off. And then we got a letter from the people who own the character, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, from their lawyers saying cease and desist, or we'll sue you and make life miserable for you. And so we immediately said, "Oh, sorry," pulled the record off the market.
How do you look back on your time at Mercury Records, where you're working as a session player?
What about that?
How valuable do you rate that time now in terms, I guess, as of your development as a musician?
How valuable?
Yeah.
Do I rate that time? Okay.
Yeah.
You got that Australian brogue there, John. Well, it was very important. I was in Atlanta, living in Atlanta, and a gentleman named Shelby Singleton came through. He was in charge of promotion for the Southeast, I believe, for Mercury. And he came through a little local show I was doing, and he came through with the Big Bopper, J.P. Richardson. And JP had just had his first release, and they were promoting it. And of course, this little show was sponsored by a pretty important radio station in the area. And so I met Shelby backstage, and I guess he liked what I did on the show. He very soon after that was moved to A&R, and he was put in charge of A&R in Nashville. And so he called me and asked me, did I want to move up there and be in the A&R department as an assistant. He already had Jerry Kennedy working with him, and Shelby and Jerry both were from Shreveport, Louisiana. And I said, well, gosh, yeah. I said, how much money do I make doing that? He said, well, you'll only make $50 a week, but you'll play on a lot of sessions. I said, okay. And so I moved up and did that for several years.
What were some of the more memorable sessions you played on there?
Oh, gosh, we played. Shelby was prolific. We cut so many records, unbelievable. We cut Brooke Benton, Patti Page, Clyde McPhatter, all the country, actually, Leroy Van Dyke. As a matter of fact, the day I cut Ahab the Arab, I think it was January 20th or something like that. I'd just moved up from Atlanta to Nashville on January 2nd. And so that morning we cut Ahab the Arab. At 2 o'clock we cut Leroy Van Dyke's Walk On By. And at 6 o'clock we cut a guy named Joe Dowell who had a hit with Wooden Heart. So we cut 3 big hit records in one day. And that was a pretty memorable day.
Yeah, I would say so. Could you foresee the hit potential of records like Ahab the Arab when you recorded it? Did its success surprise you?
Yeah, no, it didn't surprise. I thought it was a hit when I wrote it. I wrote it the night before the session. I had songs picked out to record, but I didn't like any of them. I mean, they were okay, but I didn't think they'd do anything. And so it was more like a mill. We cranked them out back in those days. So I wrote this song, and we cut it first on the session the next morning. And I knew when I heard the playback and the buzz in the studio, the musicians on the session were laughing and they were excited about it. So I knew it was a hit.
Were you always comfortable with the term novelty song being used to describe some of your music?
Yeah, I didn't care.
Didn't mind? Has it bothered you, though, over the years, though, that maybe the more serious side of your music has been overshadowed by the comedy work?
I don't know. It doesn't bother me. It may be true that I've had trouble getting a straight song to make it because of my image, but that's the way life is, and that's certainly the way that show business is. I mean, if you get categorized as one type of entertainer, it's hard to sway the public, although I did a couple of times with Everything Is Beautiful and Misty.
Yeah.
And they were big successes, and they weren't comedy or novelty, as the phrase was back in the early days. But, I'm a musician. I love music. I have a big time just playing and singing, and if it's a hit, that's a bonus.
I read you quoted somewhere as saying you didn't feel that you paid enough attention to being a star around the time of Ahab's success. Do you think that was a reason, perhaps, that it was a few years before you found more success?
Yeah, I had no idea that you're supposed to have an agenda and go out there and really shoot for a goal. I was just having a big time playing sessions, arranging sessions, writing songs, doing shows, performances from time to time. And I didn't really plan it out. I didn't hire PR. I didn't, didn't do any of those things that all the other guys that really just wanted to be, quote, stars, unquote, did.
Yeah.
So, I probably could have made a more of a dent as an artist had I been more specific in my goals.
How do you look back on your time at Monument Records now?
Well, I had a big time at Monument. I recorded Guitarzan there and Mr. Businessman, and Along Came Jones, and several things that were fairly successful. And Fred Foster, who owned Monument, let me produce some acts for Monument, so I enjoyed that.
When those hits started to come again in the late 60s, were you torn at any stage between making a decision on which direction your music would take, whether it would go down that comedy road or otherwise?
No, I still didn't have a clue. I just, anything I thought that would be successful, I cut it, whether it was comedy or just a love song or whatever.
Of course, you mentioned Everything Is Beautiful, one of your biggest successes away from the comedy field. What can you recall of the creation of that song?
Well, I just signed with Barnaby. I just left Monument, signed with Barnaby Records, and that was Andy Williams' company, distributed by CBS. And I was also part of the deal. I was going to host the Andy Williams Summer Show on NBC. That year is 1970, and I wanted a song that would not only be a hit for my first release, but also quite possibly be used as the theme for that television show. And so I just sort of chained myself to the piano in the basement at the house we were living in at the time, and didn't come out until I thought I'd written something that would fill the bill. And I wrote Everything Is Beautiful. I was looking through a little book of, I think it was Chinese proverbs or whatever, East Indian proverbs, and it said everything is beautiful in its own way, blah, blah, blah. Little verses, and I thought, yeah, that's an idea. I wrote that song, Grasshopper.
And you won a Grammy for that, but I believe you weren't there to accept it. You were down here with us, yeah.
I was in Sydney. Glenn Campbell, I think, accepted the Grammy.
Yeah.
I want to get that from him one of these days.
I believe the children's voices on that track were recorded at your daughter's school at the time. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. After we cut the track, and I got the idea to put the little children singing the Jesus Loves the Little Children, and so I took a portable recorder. I took the engineer, and he had a great portable recorder, and we went to the school, and the kids assembled in the lunchroom or the assembly hall or whatever there at the school, and they had a little upright piano, and they recorded it. We took it in about 1 or 2 takes, and said thank you very much. Took it back to the studio, spliced it onto the beginning of the record, and covered the splice with a string cord, and there you have it.
Yeah, it was a perfect fit, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Tell us about the initial spark that inspired you to write The Streak.
I was on a plane flying from L.A. to Nashville, reading a weekly news magazine, Newsweek or Time or one of those. And in the back, if you've ever read those, they have little blurbs. They're about 1 inch or 2 high, and they talk about various and sundry events that happened that week. And one of the little blurbs was about a college student in California who took off his clothes and ran through a crowd, and they called it streaking. And I thought, wow, now there's an idea for a song. So I made a few notes on some piece of paper I could find there in the airplane, and got home and stuck it in the piano bench with all my other song ideas. First thing you know, on the news, streaking is the biggest thing out there. And so I ran in the studio and cut the song. And by the time I could get my record out, there were already like 10 or 15 other streaking records on the market. But mine, luckily, was the one that made it.
Yeah. As a songwriter, are you always, I guess, have your songwriter's radar up looking for song ideas like that?
Yeah, I don't even have to think about it anymore. My radar is always up looking for an idea, a phrase. You'll see something on a billboard or hear something on television or the radio, and you'll say, there's an idea. So, I mean, I've trained myself to do it, I guess, over the years.
Now, another major success soon after that with Misty, a fantastic arrangement of that. How did that come about?
We were in the studio, my road band and I. Studio wasn't being used to make records. We were just in there rehearsing for a television show we were going to do the next day. And during a break in the rehearsal, we started clowning around with Misty with a fiddle and a steel and a banjo. We weren't making fun of the song. We were just saying, boy, wouldn't it be weird if somebody cut it like this? And it started sounding great. So I called the engineer and I said, get in here, let's cut this. And he was home cleaning out his garage or something. So he came in and we cut it in about 2 takes. And sure enough, wow.
Is it funny how some of the best things happen by accident like that?
Yeah, it's sort of like maybe there are angels up there watching out after all of us.
I believe you had your own theatre running in Branson in the 90s. Tell us about that.
Well, we built it in 90, 91. opened in '91. I think we opened in April or May. And I did the seasons back in those days lasted 6 months. May, June, July, August, September, October. And so I did 3 seasons. And at the end of that time, I was just exhausted. And so I sold the theater. But we carried the note. And they were good. They made all the payments. But when the balloon came due 5 years later, they said, we can't make the balloon. So we got it back.
Huh.
And so I rented it to them for a long time. And then they said, well, we're going to get out of the show business in this theater. This theater's too big for us. And so they left. And I decided, well, I'll go work it again. So I worked 2004, 2005, and put it on the market in 2006 and sold it last year, 2006.
Another area where you've had a lot of success over the years is with music videos, producing videos to your songs. I guess a lot of your comedy songs in particular would lend themselves perfectly to that medium. Did you always feel that?
Yeah, I thought that, videos have gotten progressively more complicated, more expensive, and more intricate, and more entertaining. But back in those days, I mean, it was just an adjunct to the music business. It was, it wasn't that important. And so I thought, well, we'll just go out and shoot a few of these videos. Comedy songs would be a welcome, I think, departure from the normal. And so we did, and put them in a package. And the timing turned out to be perfect because people had, at that time, bought the hardware. They'd bought the VHS machine, and they wanted something to play on it. And so with an 800 number ad on television, on cable television, we sold millions of them. And who knew, but I mean, it was, like I say, angels are up there looking out after us.
Yeah. You're very much in control of your own product now with your own label. Have you ever gone down the avenue of trying to obtain control of your classic material?
Well, you can recut it. The record companies don't give it up usually. Sometimes you can buy it back. Sometimes they'll just say, hey, we're not selling this anymore, and they'll give it back.
Yeah.
But most of the time you have to recut it. But, and that takes time, and it's hard because you got to try to get it as close to the original sound as you can.
Mm.
But I've done a lot of that, and I've got quite a backlog of old stuff recut, and so I am somewhat in control of a lot of the old things that I cut.
Is songwriting something that's gotten easier for you over the years?
Yeah, you figure it out finally. I mean, it's an art and a craft, but it's mostly a craft. And if you figure out how to craft the song, the art kind of takes care of itself, because if you're artistic at all, you can write something out and make it fit, make it rhyme, and make it fit the meter, and then you'll see, oh yeah, and if I change this, it becomes more artsy. And so it becomes, it has for me anyway. I've learned how to do it. If I would just take time to write every day, I think I'd write quite a few things, but of course life gets in the way.
Yeah. In terms of your comedy material, are there any subjects that probably aren't open to parody, or is it a fair game for everything, do you think?
No, I think there are subjects that just don't lend themselves to parody at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the human condition. We're pretty superstitious here on Earth, So and I'm in that group, so I don't touch certain things.
Yeah. And what's coming up for you this year, Ray?
Well, we're launching the way the changes that have occurred in the music business and the record business have, in my opinion, made it easier for the independent labels to be successful again. And so I've cranked up Clyde Records again, and we're putting out product. I'm in the studio a lot, and we're cranking out stuff and hiring promotion and hiring marketing and getting a better website up because you sell a lot of product over the web, and also making deals with distributors who can get the product into the stores. And it's quite an undertaking, but I've been doing it all my life, so I think I got a handle on it. But I've hired some folks that will be in charge of shepherding this enterprise, and hopefully we'll see some results before the end of the year.
And is it just your own material coming out on your label, or are you looking at?
No, I'm looking at once I spearhead the effort with my stuff, then I want to, if we're successful, I want to attract some other artists and produce them. And I own some things that I produced long ago. Boots Randolph, who is a sax player, I'm sure you probably know Boots.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were on Monument together, and years ago I produced an album, 20 sides for direct marketing over the cable channels, and we sold a lot of it, and I still have that, so I want to put that out again.
Fantastic. And just to finish off, Ray, what would be the best piece of career advice you could give to a new artist just starting out today?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I wouldn't presume to say anything to anybody that was ironclad, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just, say it, through my experience, you got to just keep after it. You can't be discouraged, and you have to. If you know that you're good, if you know that if you believe in yourself, and other people may not, but it's a big world out there, so just keep after it.
That sounds like sound advice to me. Thanks so much, Ray. Thanks for decades of wonderful entertainment, and we're certainly hoping there'll be many more to come yet.
Well, thank you, John. I also hope that.
And who knows, maybe we'll see you back down in Australia soon. But don't come down at Grammy time, will you?
Yeah, no, well, it might not make any difference now, but I'll certainly look forward to coming if I ever get the chance.
That would be great. All the best,
Thanks,
Ray.
John.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.